Alrighty, hi everyone. My name's Lucy Cooper. I'm a rural reporter with ABC Southern Queensland, and I've been asked to moderate this panel today, which I'm really excited about. Just quickly, a little bit about me. I'm from Hobart, Tasmania. Please, no jokes. I've had them all. At the end of high school, a couple of years ago, I thought, I like science, I like communications, I love getting out and about. So thought, I suppose agriculture kind of fits that bill. So went off to UTAS, the only university we've got down there, but it's got an excellent ag program. And I started studying there, doing a Bachelor of Agriculture and Business, and got a lot of opportunities during that time. But a key thing, I'm not from a farm and I don't have that agricultural background. So did lots of unpaid work, which I was more than happy to do, like milking cows, shearing sheep, picking berries, all the lot. And kind of towards the end of my degree last year, I thought, I still love that communication side of things. So went and had a chat with the team at the Country Hour in Hobart, and we got talking, and I got an internship with them, and then got some paid work, which was wonderful, producing. And finally, in May this year, I got offered a job to move up here and be the rural reporter, which is just a wonderful opportunity, and not a lot of people get that in life, really. So packed up my bags and still climatizing, as you can see, I'm in a dress, but got this wonderful opportunity to come tell the stories of agriculture and rural life, which is just one of the best things I reckon you could do in the world. So anyway, that's enough about me, but I just wanted you to get a bit of a background that I'm not some freaky media journo student or something. I've really do have quite the passion for agriculture. But I'll introduce the stars of the show, really. Professor Craig Bailey, he's the director of USQ Centre for Agricultural Engineering. And we've got Jan Edwards, the director of Agronomy and Ideation, which is one of the coolest names I've ever heard. And she's at Initec Pivot Fertilizers. We've got Dr. Peter Carberry. He's the general manager of Grains Research and Development Corporation. I'm sure you guys already know this, but I'll just say it anyway. And Paul McIntosh, or Macca, Northern Region Extension Agronomist, Pulse Australia and Australian Herbicide Resistant Initiative. I love interviewing Paul, but his title is always a pain to read out on the radio. So I just say Paul McIntosh at this point and everyone knows. And today what we're talking about is that theme of sparking the future. So really everything we've noticed today, everyone has spoken about the research they're doing at the moment, but that final slide has always been about the impact and future things going on. And that's something that we'll be talking about today, really. So we'll start off, and very broadly, let's think about the future. Whoever wants to answer this one first, is how are we visualising that broad acre cropping industry in Queensland in, let's say, 20 years' time? Where are you seeing we're at?
Well, Lucy, I'll go first. I guess, I think the things that we are starting to see emerge in common, everyday life around technologies is the thing that sort of drives me. So in terms of our panel today, I'll probably bring a bit of an engineering technology perspective to this. And I think, what we've seen in the last maybe 5 to 10 years is a rapid emergence of mass consumer electronics. And what that has done is enable things in agriculture and tools in agriculture that we once would never have had or dreamt. And you saw some examples here before where, Derek had thrown the quadrate away and he's got the phone and he's measuring stuff on the ground. So for me, it's about, if you think about our life now in terms of its connectedness with mobile phones and those sorts of things, that sort of experience is going to be common on the farm. I think, it'll just be more informed and more connected around the sort of things that we do now.
Thank you. I guess it's, when you're thinking about the future, it's always worth remembering that change is both more surprising and probably slower than we imagine. So I don't actually think anyone predicted either the iPhone in terms of its technology nor its rapid adoption. But by the same token, I'm sure we all thought we'd probably have electric cars by now, probably even a jetpack for those of you who watch the Jetsons. So when you're thinking 20 years out, there's always going to be something that we really just haven't thought of. But what I'm hopeful of for agriculture in Queensland that far out is that if you think about who part of the equation, that it is more diverse. I think the national stats are something like women make up 41% of agricultural jobs, but they hold only about 18% of the managerial positions and 2% of the CEO positions. And also the agricultural workforce in Australia, I think the average age is about 56, which is 17 years older than the rest of the national workforce. So I think I would hope that in 20 years' time, we've shifted the demographics a little bit. We're a little bit more diverse in terms of both age and gender, and probably also nationality, which will bring a lot more diversity of thought, if nothing else. So that's the who part of the equation. In terms of the sort of the what, I imagine that there'll be a bigger emphasis on northern agriculture, particularly things like cotton. There's probably going to be a greater emphasis on horticulture and diversified specialty crops, and probably a decrease in sugar, I'd say. And that's probably about it for the moment. Peter?
Peter, I was going to say you're with grains, so something that was brought up many times today is talking about that disease and constantly the industry is just having to adapt. Is that something that's going to be in, are we going to have the same varieties now as in 20 years, or are we just going to have all these beautiful new grain varieties that we may not have even heard of yet?
Well, a couple of aspects there. I think that agriculture's always had the challenge of pests and disease, and agriculture's always been ahead of the game. Australian farmers and the support network through the advisors do a fantastic job of producing quality crops that are demanded by the world, and that's probably going to continue. Conscious about the items that Craig and Jan brought forward about diversification. Can high value crops, horticulture or others, come in to the broad ecosystems? But I think the key point, feeding off your question, is that continual investment in R&D and innovation will continue to keep Australian growers ahead of the threats out there, which will be continual. That we hear that through all the biosecurity issues that are coming in constantly, plus the endemic pests, and so we have to invest in R&D. I mean, I've got to say that as an R&D representative here. I was going to start off. You put that question there. I just flew in from Hobart yesterday. I was down there to go and have a look at a GRDC project, the hyper yielding cereal project. In that environment, they're producing 14 tonne per hectare wheat crops, 10 tonne per hectare barley crops, sown today and harvested in March, 8 tonne fava bean crop. So there's a signal. Okay, their environment is different, but it shows that when you have the genetics aligned with the management and the ability to take advantage of the environment you're given, then that's what you can do. And I think one of the things we're going to see is a much more oriented, practical implementation relevant to the opportunities provided, that sensing and other things are going to forewarn growers that this is going to be likely a good season or a poor season, this is likely the pest. And if that predictive dimension of agriculture can really take steps forward, then growers can, in Queensland, grow 10 tonne wheat crops. And they've got to be brave enough and take the risk to be able to do it, and have the technology to be able to do it.
Paul, any final comment? Yeah, go on.
No, it's fantastic, Peter. That's a great response. And I guess for what do I visualise in 20 years' time? Well, I look back at 20 years ago for me, which is back in 2001 or whatever it was. And the mobile phone was definitely was in well and truly then. We didn't have much conception about what we're doing with weed seeking and all that sort of stuff now. we had lots of knowledge to gain about insects, and of course we were just starting with the fungicide issues that we've got these days in some of our crops, particularly chickpeas. So if you look back 40 years ago, like we didn't have mobile phones, you know, just had landlines, there was basic mechanical cultivation, glyphosate was $23 a litre, you know, really just coming in then. So I think in the next 20 years, we're just going to advance on those principles. And of course, one of the principles maybe it's a challenge I'd like to see is BOM be more accurate. And I don't want to laugh or anything like that, but it really can help our farming community for them to be more accurate in their predictions and let our farmers get on the front foot with making decisions that will reflect the weather sort of stuff. So 20 years time, more of the same, more ag engineering, more everything we're going to be doing. And I'm not sure whether myself or my mate up the back, Huey Two Fathers, will be still here in 20 years time. So I'll leave you all to carry the can.
I think something that's really key out of this is the fact that we like to look forward to 20 years in the future. And I've got to say, it sounds extremely positive, which is a wonderful thing in agriculture. But for growers hearing this, they maybe think, okay, 20 years, like they may be retired or living up life and all. But what can we take from people today who are out there on the field and utilize that to ensure that 20 years we do have that really great time in agriculture? What can we opportunize on now?
Well, I guess 20 years isn't actually that long when you think about it. It's actually what, 2 generations of wheat breeding or something. So it's actually it'll come upon us quicker than we think. But I think that there are lots and lots of existing technologies that we know about, have been around a while, that really haven't had the adoption that maybe they should. And I think we could probably all rattle off 3 or 4 things that would help in the technological area. There's increased use of sensing and mapping, modelling, a lot of things to do with data and better use and better interpretation of data. But there's also other things in terms of, if you think more broadly, better HR skills on farm is something that probably is something that we could do now if people wanted to. HR skills, there's greater efficiencies, better attention to farm business structures and generational change. So there's heaps of things that probably we aren't using to their fullest that we could already adopt.
Yeah, and if I could sort of just build off that a bit, and I guess, you know, Peter was talking about future potential, but there's also potential that's out in the field now that hasn't been realised. And so, you know, only need to look at, you know, your top 20% of farmers relative to the mean, and there's quite a substantial difference between the productivity of those farmers relative to the average. So, you know, I think in the cotton industry, for example, the difference between the top 20% and the average is something like $1,000 a hectare. In grains, it might be something like $140 a hectare. And I think, Peter, you've done some work with APSIM looking at, you know, the actual, or the yield potential versus what's actually achieved. And I think there's at least another 30% yield that is in that yield gap that's not actually realised at the moment. So that's potential that's in the field that we haven't realised. So that's not future innovation, that's actually here and now in terms of what we could achieve. The other thing I think that we miss too is that we put a lot of resources into growing a crop and then we only harvest a small part of that crop. And so what could we use that crop, other parts of that crop for, and how could we extract value out of that as well? And the bits that we harvest and we sell, we also lose at least 15% of that. So there's plenty of opportunity within the farming system and also in the value chain where we can extract value.
Yeah, Craig, can I follow on? Lucy, can I follow on from that? This whole issue of yield gap is an interesting one for me and for GRDC. And so it is a question about, well, how much effort do we put into using current technology and knowledge and shifting farmers up to their achievable yields, essentially, and how much then do we put into them taking greater risks to get to a water limited yield potential, and then how much do we put investment do we put into creating new frontiers through innovation and technology? And I think that the yield gap story has narrowed. Craig, the evidence we've seen, GLDC ran a national paddock survey over 5 years that showed that about 60% of the crops that we surveyed, there was no discernible yield gap. And if there was a gap, it was probably in the better years and the better environments, what I was talking about before. And so, you know, Hugh and Macca and the advisors and the growers have done a great job of being technically efficient. And I think we have to think about, through the universities, for the people in this room here, where's the innovation, where's the step changes are going to come from next that's going to help drive profitability. And you know, as an investor, that we've got to be thinking we've got a balanced portfolio about how do we invest in innovation that's going to lead to technical change, as well as supporting growers to meet the potential they've got now.
And you want to add on? I was going to direct a question at you, Paul, which is...
Okay,
yeah.
go your hardest. I was going to say something else, but don't.
You go, and then I'll direct a question.
Okay. I guess I'd take a different view on, because I've spent a lot of years in the paddock, as some of my compadres have and stuff like that. I guess I hear about, you know, we're running out of agronomists, or I should say the agronomists are getting older. And that's not a good, the alternative is not really good, of course, but they're getting old and they're retiring. And I really hope through the USQ and all the other universities and ag colleges and stuff that we've got the next suite of agronomists coming on, because believe it or not, myself and Huey and a few other blokes, Stoney might be here somewhere, we can't go on forever. So I was pretty intrigued to hear some time ago, Peter, where is it something like 60% of the agronomists in Australia got less than 5 years experience? Is that correct? Johnny Rucoost, can you say that? Richard? Well, you know, just have a look at Huey up there and me. We're 65, 66. So we need those agronomists to come on. So that's the first thing. You need to have that interaction with the farmer on those paddocks. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is we've got to really ramp up the breeding. And I guess I said to calves before, I said, do you think I can mention genetic modifying, or should I just go to gene editing? But I'm really concerned about the intensity of temperatures that we're getting, or the extremes of temperatures we're getting. And I see feather top roads germinating in different types of the year, and not only just summer. And of course, I see other crops that we need to really boost up to get the yields that we need and take care of the extremes of temperature, the extremes of frost. Like chickpeas, we've not gained 1 ounce, I don't think, carbs, from your experience, are getting them to hold a flower and hold a pod under 15 degrees centigrade. You know, it's been there for a long time, that thing, and I just wish to bounce that down a bit so that we can hold onto those extra pods, hold onto those extra flowers. And while it's not a big picture stuff, it's certainly right at the heart of the thing what I've been doing in agronomy for 40 odd years, getting a return for farmers, making sure it's sustainable, getting the right advice to them and keeping them in business, and fairly enthused about the future, because sometimes when it doesn't rain for 2 years, they get fairly unenthused.
Well, it's like you read my mind, because I was going to say something that we haven't mentioned when we're thinking about 20 years' time, and when we're thinking about capitalising on opportunities, is the climate. It's not going to be the same in 20 years' time, and that's what the modelling shows, that's what science is showing. So what do we need to be doing now to ensure that we've got ag in, we'll have ag in 20, but let's say 50, 100 years' time. Are we missing out on opportunities now?
I might as well keep going, see I'm on a roll. I did mention genetic modification and gene editing. I know that we're going to be able to sell the crops, but they're hammering us some of our export markets now with different pesticides. You know, we need to make sure we can get that gene editing and gene modification done. Is Meryl Ryan still here? So yeah, people like Meryl Ryan are worth their weight in gold. They should be plated, those sorts of people, because they're going to keep moving along with our breeding of our different crops. And for me, it's a pulse crop, so they're going to keep going, pushing forward, getting the right breeding for the right product for the right climate. So when we start to talk about mung beans going from Carpentaria to Ayr down to the Victorian border, you know you're going to need a few different things to push the boundaries of where we crop some of these high value crops.
Pete, you say a quick thing, and then Jan, you say what you want to say. It's a fight over the microphones down here,
I want
everyone.
to correct him, which is sort of fun.
Yeah.
You know, a real risk to science is that people in the same sentence go genetic modification and genome editing. They're completely different technologies. Genome editing is about accelerating the mutation process and taking advantage of that. And it's a different regulatory environment. And genome editing is a gift to science, and we've got to make sure we protect it, and the science community's got to be able to communicate that and pass that on. GMO has been important, obviously, from the cotton industry and else, but genome editing, you know, we've got a window of opportunity to protect that technology so it doesn't get regulated out.
Jan, please level out the chat here. female voice.
I was just going to say that it is probably, I mean, I know I'm sitting on a panel with people who think a lot about agronomy from a science perspective, but agriculture is also about business, and it's about the people in the business. So when you're thinking about productivity gains and chasing those little sort of 5%ers that all add up to big productivity gains, it is worth remembering that you have to figure out a way that the farmer will also benefit from those, because generally those productivity gains benefit the consumer. And so they get lower prices and higher quality. And so the challenge is to make that productivity gain also benefit the producer. I don't think that related to climate change, but I thought I'd say it anyway. Lucy?
I liked it. I liked it for sure. You want to go?
I was just going to add, I mean, I think we need to embrace that the next 20 years, 30 years, 50 years is going to be a lot more variable than it is now. And so we need to embed that in R&D. So, what are the huge drivers of crop productivity? It's the amount of water that's available to the crop, it's the cropping rotation, it's the crop selection, those sort of things. And that really needs to be embedded into our thinking now. So it's not just about getting more out of the things we do now, but start to think about future scenarios. We've got the expertise around modelling and so forth to look at those sort of scenarios. And also, some of what we've learned in southern systems will move north, and north will move even further north. So there's those sort of experiences and those opportunities as well.
And I mean, you just never know what's right around the corner. We've had years of drought, and La Nina's declared today. So you don't know what's happening. I think the bomb was probably holding off on that one after last year's shambles, but we got there in the end, and it's one of those things in life, And I suppose off the back of all of this, we've spoken about opportunities, and as we spoke about climate change and everything, we have to acknowledge that there's always going to be challenges in agriculture, sometimes more challenges than opportunities. What challenges will we need to, what do we need to focus on? What do we need to solve? Craig, I'll start with you. Technology, we've got technology available, but there is an adoption gap. Well, would you agree that there's an adoption gap in agriculture out with Old Mate in Fargo or whatever,
Yeah, I guess, the adoption issue is more about making sure you've selected the right piece of technology for the problem. And I think that's generally where the issue falls down, is if you haven't properly identified what it is you're trying to solve. And that's the questions often asked of me, what sort of piece of technology should I be adopting? And the classic response is, well, what's your problem? And then we can work out what sort of piece of technology that you should be using. I think there's a couple of things here for me, and one of my personal interests is around technologies and trying to commercialise those technologies and get adoption, and spend a lot of time trying to understand the connection between the Australian market and the American market. And one of the key challenges for us here in Australia is that we've got really early adopters of technology. We've got people who have a real thirst for that technology. And if we look at and this is no surprise, if we look at the growing conditions in Australia, highly variable. In fact, agriculture is more variable than any other industry in Australia. So if you include mining and a whole heap of other sectors, agriculture actually, in terms of its output, is more variable. If you consider that to something like the United States, it's nowhere near as variable, and you're operating in a protected market over there as well. So you've always got a price guarantee. But what we do have is we have a synergy between our farmers here and farmers in the US, and they have a mass market. And so we've got farmers here that are interested in that technology earlier because they're operating in a highly variable climate. So there's a real thirst to try things before others will try it. And there's a real opportunity for us to incubate that technology here in Australia with the view that that could be commercialised in those mass markets in America. And so for me, just purely thinking it from a technology point of view, I think it's really important that we make those connections. We should have a really global outlook in terms of how those technologies should be developed and where else they can be sold, so that we get that here first. So that's one of my missions at the moment, is trying to make that connection. But just in terms of the landscape, I guess the technologies that we develop today need to be a lot more diverse than what they've been, because there's going to be a lot more issues. And the sector is not just about productivity anymore, it's also about environmental dividends as well. So not only do you need to grow, be more productive, but you've got to be more sustainable in that process. So the technologies that you develop will have multiple objectives, not just one. So I might just add that to the list.
of the many things. Jan, I might say for you, fertilizer, I mean, can we afford it next year? I'm getting a bit worried for all my growers out there. It's going up, price is going up, and availability is going down. So what are we going to be looking to for a solution there?
Yeah, well, I guess it is one of the very big challenges at the moment that input costs, not just fertiliser, but across the board, have risen dramatically due to a whole range of factors overseas. The real question is this a 1 year blip, a 2 year period, or what they call a super cycle that goes on for quite some time? And so for any of the inputs, I mean, it could be steel, it could be wood, it could be fertiliser, it could be glyphosate. We are looking at a period where supply is constrained and price is a bit higher. So farmers will have to look to carefully sort of planning and budgeting and using a whole range of tools that they might have on offer, starting with soil testing, starting with paddock planning, starting with using rotations, whatever they can do to make that fertiliser go further, be more efficient, and that includes using enhanced efficiency fertilisers and things. So that will be a real challenge heading into the next winter crop season.
Paul, do you think we need to then, going off the back of that, be reducing our reliance on fertilisers and putting, you know, a bit of pulses in our ground or something?
Lucy, we've had a talk about this morning already, about the amount of nitrogen that they might leave in the soil and sort of stuff. So, yes, there's all that sort of stuff. I guess I got one thing that I consider more important than that, and that's the availability of fresh water in the world. So nearly 8 billion people, and we're trying to feed them off this thin ribbon of dirt around the world. And we've got 94% of the water in the world is salt. And there's about 5 or 6% that's fresh, and some of it's tied up in icebergs, some of it's tied up in swamps. So we're going to try and feed 8 billion people at this stage. Put on whatever the heck you could add up in 20 years' time. The demands are going to be huge for growing crops, but there's also going to be a demand for fresh water to grow those crops. And that's going to be a major thing of what in Australia we need to do, not only just breeding, but also think about how we're going to water these crops, particularly with our climate so variable and ability to be able to store water in the soil. So there's a few issues there, but that's what I see as one of my, apart from getting older for the agros, it's one of my issues.
Can I add a couple more?
I was going to say, you go on to that.
Just a couple more things to think about when you're thinking about sort of challenges for agriculture. Goes without saying our changing and variable climate, but also labour. So skilled labour is going to be a challenge. It is a challenge now, but it will be because the skills we need is also changing. So farms probably need less people to put up fences and more people that are mechatronics engineers or IT experts. They need marketing experts. They need people to handle social media. So skills and labour are incredibly important. We have an ageing infrastructure, and at some point we're going to have to address the infrastructure that allows farms to operate. That includes the physical infrastructure. It also includes things like the internet and getting coverage for everyone to allow them to actually communicate and run a business effectively, because Queensland in particular is a decentralised and very, very big state. So one of the other ones is social licence. I think NFF did a little study a little while ago and found that 83% of Australians feel that their relationship to agriculture is either non-existent or distant. So if you're going to continue to have an industry, you need a social licence, and you need people to understand what you do and how you do it. And finally, the one I'll throw in is access to capital. So there's an underspend in, there's a big gap in the amount of money we need to generate all the innovations and the research we need to keep agriculture innovating. So those are the ones I'd throw into the mix.
Throw them in for sure. I completely agree with all of this, and I think skilled labour is something that is a gap, and that is what farmers are worried about. But that other thing, and I think, Paul, you touched on it before, is that next generation. You know, agros are getting older and there's no one feeling that. So we're in a lecture theatre today at USQ, and is anyone here a student? Is anyone here an undergraduate student? We've got one, okay. And I know that this is here for you guys, researchers, for the industry, for government. I know that, but I think that you could fill up all these seats with students, and I know, having been one literally 8 months ago, I would have loved to have listened to some of this, because then I can go in. Yeah, I'll come to you in a second, Gavin. But it's that bringing that younger generation, having that chat, and I just think for next time, wouldn't that be awesome? Or what do you reckon, Gavin? Students are on holidays. You know what? You're not wrong there. But hey, is it the worst thing? Or I don't know. That's possible for next time. Let's get some of the young guys in, and they might have, but I think they can learn off everyone else here and take that forward.
Lucy, I think also the skills that we've had in the past are not necessarily the skills we need in the future. And we've developed a new program here, and you've made the segue to students, so I'll jump on top of that. But so one of the things we've done here at the university is develop a new program in Bachelor of Ag Technology Management, or what we affectionately call BATMAN. And essentially it's a combination of a science degree, an engineering degree, and a business degree. And so this is something that we've engaged with industry a lot about what are the future needs for the workforce. And a lot of people have come to us and said, graduates that have come out of some of the metropolitan universities are very understand the concepts and the theory, but don't know how to actually apply it and get value out of the technology. And so that's something that we're trying to respond to at the moment, is to create, the skills for the next generation of people in agriculture, who will be very different to the people that are here now. Doesn't circumvent the need for agronomists, I might add, but there needs to be an agronomist with an engineering skill base, and also maybe a bit of business in there as well. So that's the key point.
And that is a wonderful example of those things moving forward. We've also got the Ag Tech and Logistics Hub in Toowoomba, which Stephen's here today. And that's a perfect example of bringing those guys from Brisbane who have probably never stepped on a farm, half of them, to come out and combine those things together. So I think collaboration is something that's really key to moving forward. And it leads perfectly onto my next kind of question is, what's that role that universities, government and industry are going to have in supporting broadacre cropping in Queensland in the future? Today's a perfect example of collaboration, isn't it? Do you want to go, Peter?
Absolutely.
Your GRDC.
Peter, you've got the microphone. You might want to.
Yeah, it's a really pertinent question around where's the capacity for agriculture going forward and who's going to support it. You look at the long distinguished history of the Department of Ag in Queensland, or any of the departments around Australia. What's the ongoing role for government being close to practice, being in the innovative space, being regulatory in terms of their statutory responsibilities? Chris, Wayne, you guys can answer that, but agriculture is built on the support from the departments of Ag. They not only through the people that stay there, but the people that get trained there and move off in to become, agros, etc. What's the role of the private sector through the startup ecosystem that's happening, and it's really vibrant. And particularly, GRDC as an investor, what's our role in supporting capacity so that it can deliver to industry? And it's a discussion we're having, and a discussion we're having with multiple players. Now, clearly, the lead there was that the universities in training, support, in providing innovation play a really critical role. And I'll certainly suggest that the government has to maintain a role as well for the state departments. Sound like a politician then, didn't I?
I was like, oh, it's a press conference. No. I suppose whoever wants to follow up with this question is, going off all of that, is the relationship at the moment between university, governments and industry strong enough to ensure that we can continue having things like BACI? And do we need to work on that? Paul, what do you think?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that all I need to say?
Yeah.
No, definitely. There's got to be more cooperation and industry involvement with universities and all that. I'm pretty lucky. I've got some people down at UQ, and they get me to do lectures to third years. I don't know why they do that, but I have a great lot of fun. And of course, they're all these young people, and they gather around. And some think they know something, some don't know much at all. But it's really uplifting to see all these young people coming into ag and having 20 third year students from the Gatton University sort of stuff. So. What was the question again? I'm going well anyway. I'll keep going on that thing. So there is young people coming in, and the young girls are coming in, and that's really lifted our numbers of agros. I was down at the CCA meeting, Crop Consultants Association of Australia, down at Narrabri, and I lost count after about 30 of the young girl agronomists. They've got 2 or 3 years experience, but isn't that great to see the young girls kicking along in this agronomy thing and doing a really good job too? And that might be our future. I'm not sure where the boys are, but there's certainly a lot of females in the university system that I work around in and talk to. I think, like Pete said, like it's a cooperation of all things. So anyone rings me from here, I'll come out straight away. And same with the other things. I do talk to universities. I talk to different learning institutions all the way around the countryside about this and that and every other thing. So conglomeration, cooperation between all parties has definitely got to be part of the future for us in agriculture. If we don't, we're going to sink.
Lucy, I don't know how they measure it, but the OECD thinks that Australia ranks 76th for research efficiency and last for research collaboration. So I think that's gives you some indication that we've probably got a lot more that we can do to integrate public and private. And just, I think the problems that we're trying to tackle are probably getting more complex, and no one institution or no one body has probably got all the answers. And so I think collaboration and building better partnerships with industry to help adoption of whatever the technology it is that you've developed is probably the only way we're going to tackle some of these difficult problems.
And I think, Peter, I'll just say, I think we've said government, university and industry, but a key player has been left out of that, growers, our producers.
That's the point I was going to make, is something different about the north here. I spent most of my career in the north here, but you feel less concerned about it as you move to our southern region, western region, because the involvement of grower groups, proactive groups of growers getting together with their advisors in the consulting community and the R&D community, and driving the innovation agenda. So farming systems groups around Australia are very prominent and taking the lead, not in Queensland. And it's sort of an interesting thing. John and I were involved with CFI, the Conservation Farmers was here for a while. And anyway, so it's an interesting thing. Why is it this part of the world, the proactive farms aren't getting together in groups and marshalling the other innovation players out there together? And it would be much easier to operate if those grower groups did exist. Anyway, so that's a question back to the audience.
And that could perfectly link in as well as that gap between the top 20% and the rest of them. Do we not have that top 20 helping drive everyone else up to be reaching those yields, or who knows? But I mean, it's just one of those things that we'll have to be aware of. Craig, what do you want to add? I
was just going to say, I guess the point was made that yes, of course, those, everybody needs to work together. And I think the importance there is that that interaction needs to be transformative, not transactional. And often we get caught up into the transaction of doing something. And, all of us have done work where the best projects and the ones that had the most impact was when the relationship was quite mature and the result was built on that sort of sense of everyone more motivated for the outcome, not the transaction of a milestone report or something like that. So I think that's the key, is making sure that those relationships are mature and to a point where they're more transformative. The other thing I think is important is a longer term view. Often, and look, I came off out of a corporate farming environment, and one of the reasons I came into the university scene was to get technology out and get it adopted on farm. And so that's sort of what really drives me. So I think that's really important, is to try and get in and get that technology out, but also take a longer term view that sometimes there's the need, the want, I want something, and that's a sort of a 2-3 year horizon. Then there's the need, which is probably longer than a 5-year horizon, and that there needs to be more sustained investment in those sorts of initiatives. And, you know, I can think of in our research group, we've done a lot of work in irrigation, and, you know, that has been sustained in the cotton industry for better part of 15 years, and that's resulted in water savings greater than a Sydney harbour. Now that's all independently been assessed. It's not our ambit claim, but it was through a really long and considered investment by CRDC, which essentially yielded that outcome. And I think that's the other thing here, is that sustained involvement and commitment to a cause.
I think Northern Australia particularly, I mean, back home, I didn't quite realise how lucky we were with our irrigation schemes back there, but I'm doing some research on that in the moment, and speaking to growers, they're looking at the scheme up at Hewiton, and they're looking one in the Lockyer Valley. And a key thing for them is that there's not enough collaboration. They've been in talks with government for years and years, just these meetings that go on, but also growers can't seem to get on the same page. Paul, you touched on it, water security, having enough fresh water. Do you think irrigation in Northern Australia and Queensland is going to play a big role in the next 20 years?
It'll play a part role, that's for sure. It could be big, but, you know, sometimes the water doesn't fall exactly right. And I guess I look at that Bradfield scheme from up in North Queensland. I can just hear Graham Spackman and Brent Wilson, a few of those jokers up north, they're getting all excited about me wanting to move that water down to the top of the Murray-Darling and flowing it down the Murray-Darling. And while that doesn't help exactly on irrigation, it certainly keeps an environmental flow for that river. So when it does flood, it's going to put a bit of water everywhere. How can I answer that one? I don't really know. We certainly need water, like that's for sure. Maybe the plants that gene editing from Pete or genetic modification from me will use less water to produce more crop, more yield, and that might be a way to go for the future. I'm really concerned about water availability, and sometimes it falls out of the sky and just keeps on going down the Murray-Darling. So we might have 200 millimetres for the week or whatever, but, you know, there's only about 150 that's really good, and the rest of it, well, 100 might be good, and the rest of it goes down the sink.
You're talking about Northern Australia, is that far north or?
Oh, I've had to clarify this today. Do I mean Northern Australia is in all of Queensland, or just, no, central up, I suppose. Let's draw a line at Rocky or something, go up from there.
Plenty of water in the Burdekin. I just came from last week, and we did a 2-day mung bean agronomy course, and the least of my worries was talking about water up there in the Burdekin, you know, because they got that 1.9 or 2.0 million megalitre dam called the Burdekin Dam up there. So, you know, they're not going too bad, those fellas up there, and they're diversifying their crops. They're really ploughing ahead. It's not just cane. It's a lot of different croppings up there, like mung beans, like soybeans, like even cotton in some spots and all that stuff. So, you know, the farmers have got the yen, that's for sure, and they want to push the boundaries, and the agros go with them if they've got a bit of enthusiasm. So it's quite refreshing to see the sort of the attitude and the atmosphere you get in these courses that we run in some of these areas. It's really refreshing. Pete, about your farmer groups and stuff like that, there's not many of them left, that's right. QCT in the good old days had quite a few of them, and they've just disintegrated. There's a few still around, that's for sure. And of course, the GRDC had that great thing called RACs, Regional Advisory Committees, and Grower Solutions groups up in Central Queensland, and they were pretty handy things for finding out what's going on, getting the farmers involved and being part of the future.
You got a minute.
And now, Macca, we've got the National Grower Network that Richard Holznick runs, and so that is GRDC asking growers to come together regularly to put their issues on the table, and GRDC is obligated to respond. So Richard will be running meetings. Everyone know Richard Holznick he'll be running meetings across the northern region, Queensland, New South Wales. You're all invited to attend. You can bring the issues, or get the growers to put issues, and then, as I said, GRDC's obligated to respond to those issues, those priority issues. Now, the response might be, you're a dumbass, we're not going to do anything. No, Richard would never say that, but no, we're not going to do anything, or that we might invest in something. So there is a program that we're running nationally to allow issues to walk through the door and growers to be able to be heard by GRDC.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too. I mean, I think individual researchers obviously engage as well. So, you know, you don't necessarily need a grower group to engage, and most of our research is done on farm with farmers, and we get feedback on terms of what we do. So, you know, often in a research program, you'll get to a fork in the road. You know, you could go either way, but essentially if you're dealing with your collaborators, they'll give you some good information on which way to go that gets a practical outcome for them. So there's different ways. GRDC updates, I make a special effort to go to as many of those as I possibly can when I'm invited, and that just allows me to rub shoulders and talk, and that's my my reconnaissance, if you like. That's how I get my feedback, you know.
I think in my personal experience, the most amount of people at a growers group is when there's free beer. So always chuck that one in. And I suppose before we open up the floor to questions and everything, I want to finish with one final point. And we've spoken about a range of things, far too broad for all of us to kind of, you know, bring together. But is this money? Is the solution to all of this more money? You know, labour shortages. If you could earn $20 an hour pouring coffee, wouldn't you rather do that than out in the field, you know, working and getting a bad farmer tan? Or, you know, and can we get better research and development if we invest more with money? And is that a really sad but kind of, you know, realistic answer at the end of the day?
What's the saying, that money can't buy you happiness, but it sure does help.
From a GRDC perspective, which we have the responsibility investing levies on behalf of Australian grain growers and the government, and it's not a lack of resourcing they've got. It's a deficiency of good ideas. You know, so the opportunities there. We have Gillian Meppen up the back, John Kust, Richard Holst, Nick, myself. We're in a continuous investment cycle that GRDC is willing to talk to researchers or growers about where the needs are and where there's opportunity to innovate and progress. So I don't think at this point in time, we think that there's from our perspective, there's a lack of dollars or resources to invest. It's what we're looking for is the investments are going to lead to enduring profitability of Australian grain growers. And so yeah, from a GLDC perspective, and I'm sure the other investors, that's the same.
Yeah, on the other side of that though, I think money to adopt new technology is an issue for grain and other farmers. So they have to make choices all the time, and they don't necessarily have the money to invest in every bit of new technology that comes past. They have to make some pretty hard-nosed decisions about which ones are actually going to solve a problem for them. And so I think while you might not see a lack of resources, I think on the other side of that equation, there is a lot of technology that it's looking for a problem to solve. So I think, yeah, that's the other side of that equation, Peter.
And of course, when you do it wouldn't be a Macintosh session without mentioning herbicide resistance and what you should do about with the Weed Smart Big Six principles, would it? But anyhow, apart from that, we did a bit of a survey a while ago, and of course everyone's heard about the green on brown spray sensor, optical spot spraying machines. Well, we know that in Central Queensland, the adoption's running about 15-20%. We're down here in South Queensland, Northern New South Wales is running about 60 to 70%. That is one bit of technology that can really zap those weeds and save a huge thing. Because the biggest thing is the initial cost of the stuff. So, you know, money could make a damn sight of difference with an optical spot spraying situation in Central Queensland, that's for sure.
There you go, and then I'll finish.
It's your country, Craig.
Yeah, look, I think it's about money, where, you know, at what level, and you know, Peter was just talking about funding or, you know, investment in research. Jen also mentioned that, you know, whether businesses have got the finance to be able to purchase technologies and adopt that. And one of the and of course then whether you've got the resources to commercialise the technology as well, which is a key point. I was interested to read some work that ABARES published a while ago, and they looked at the profitability on farm. And what they came out with was that the larger enterprises tend to be more profitable. And immediately people think, well, that's a matter of scale. People have obviously, the larger businesses, the scale, you know, basically informs the difference in terms of the profitability. But when you actually prorata that, it doesn't actually make sense. And so the outcome of that work was that the larger businesses were more profitable, not because of their scale, but because they were doing something different. Their practices were different, and they had access to technologies that the other farmers didn't have access to. And so it was more of an ability to be able to access the finance to be able to transform their businesses. And I think if you could take that concept and move it down to those that don't have that opportunity, then I think you could make a huge difference.
And I suppose a final comment on that is that a lot of people, I mean, I'm not from an ag background, and it shocks me, and I think it's something that we can help with, that social license, is that, you know, everyone in urban Australia, you get paid every 2 weeks, you know, and you get paid by the end of the year, and you always have money. But if we think of this recent rain, those farmers have just gone out there and go, oh, won't be getting paid this year, that's okay. Look towards next year. And I think it's something that we can really help with, that social license, and help overcome that gap between urban and regional Australia, is helping people understand that, like, life out here isn't getting paid every 2 weeks. It's very different to that, because at the end of the day, people care about money, and it'd be silly of us not to think that, you know. But I suppose we'll open the floor to questions. I'm sorry, we've got a bit of time actually. Who has something for our panel here? Oh no, we've got.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne Hall Daff. I just wanted to, probably for Peter, I suspect, but I didn't hear the miracle of soil carbon farming mentioned at all. So in terms of, you know, an opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
We were trying to stay away from buzzwords, but yeah, let's get into it.
It's been pretty amazing to get through this far, and we have. Well, I think we talked about social license there, and you know, it is in the press now. Our greenhouse gas emissions, carbon farming, and you know, when I joined GRDC 18 months ago, it was, you know, a third order issue as part of our not even part of our current strategy. It's not called out in part of our current strategy, and now it's first order. You know, we can't not consider, well, what's going to look like in 20 or 30 years' time? What's a farm going to look like? And so it is. I'm sure it's a priority for you, Wayne, in government, to see about, well, can you get to carbon neutral, and what's the contribution of agriculture? It's certainly something that GRDC is starting to pay attention to. We've commissioned CSIRO to do an audit of the emissions from the grains industry. The Australian audit is for the whole of agriculture. It doesn't disaggregate into sectors. So we're doing that work with CSIRO, and that report will come out probably early next year. And we'll be sitting within our portfolio about how do we support growers in considering what their options are around entering carbon markets or not entering, or how they reduce their emissions. So I think you'll hear a lot more about this. You will have to deal with it just as much as most other players, and it's a prominent part of the parlance today around agriculture.
Jan, add to that?
Yeah, I can also report a similar story in that in the private industry, it has gone very rapidly from nowhere to everywhere. It's a first order issue again. Our results this year came with a climate change statement. It came with targets for 2050, but also interim targets as well. So it's very front of mind for shareholders, and because of that, it is driving very rapid change in how businesses operate.
I just think, Wayne, that it's bigger than carbon. I think it's the whole ESG space. So, you know, carbon is probably what people reflect on, but I don't know. I mean, I just think it's grown up a little bit more than that. I don't know if that's what you're seeing in government, but that's what I'm hearing, at least.
Anyone else?
Sorry, Richard, I'll go in first. Peter made good mention of the farmer, the people, and I think one of the things looking to the future, we're not really addressing the people who we're looking to improve this productivity with. Now, as Stoney would know, a lot of our clients are sole farmers now. With the technology, they cannot afford to put somebody else on. They're having to do it all themselves. One, that's putting a lot of stress on them, and two, a lot of them are lonely. And I know we find a fair bit of our time is spent there just talking to them. So I think that's something we've got to address, in that all this technology is coming in, but we've got to look at how that's going to affect the farmers and what they're able to do. And the other factor too, I think, that we need to address is the extension. There's fewer people available to do that, whether it's through the agronomy networks, or it's through the entomologists, the pathologists, the experts in the field. So I think we must remember to look at the people as well.
Anyone? I feel like that was more so an excellent comment, but would you like to add on to that, Jan, actually?
No, I think I absolutely agree with that. And it's particularly, if you think about how decentralised Queensland is, it's a very large decentralised state. I would absolutely agree that the challenge for agriculture is that the numbers employed are falling. The farms are getting bigger, and they're getting fewer of them. So absolutely right. If you're going to maintain an active sector, you need a core of people in it, and those people need to be happy, healthy and safe, both physically and mentally. So it's a real challenge. I agree.
Yes, we had many things to discuss on, and I was going to...
Yep.
So one thing we would have loved to have added in is that mental health aspect of, we talk about regional Australia struggling, but when you narrow that down and look at the statistics of those on farm, it's extraordinary. So what do you reckon, Paul?
Oh, Huey's dead right. You know, like we'd go there to do agronomy, but invariably end up with their feet under the table having a morning tea or a lunch or an afternoon tea. And that was pretty good. And that's where it's what happens, isn't it? And particularly for me. So it's Hugh Reardon-Smith is spot on with that sort of comment. We do agronomy, but we also do social counselling and all that sort of stuff. And still hasn't died to this day. There's still people I get ringing me up from the Western Downs after 35 years. I haven't been around out there. 35 years and they're still ringing me up. So once you got a friend, haven't you?
Yeah, I reckon Craig's vision is to make agriculture devoid of people. I mean, the future of agriculture is automation, and there's going to be, you'll be able to run your farm from Pitt Street, with you, isn't it, Craig? That's where you're going to get to.
I'm not sure I said that.
But also, I just want to say too that I think what we're going to see is that I think Jan said, farming is a business too, and it's going to become much more business oriented than family farming as we go forward. It's, you just look at land prices now and the asset value that farmers have got in managing. I think those are going to play out. The much more business oriented in terms of how farms are run. And Craig, are we going to see peopless farms?
I think a key thing is what we're saying here is, and I think Jan mentioned, we're going to see different careers in ag. So maybe we won't be devoid of people because we'll need somebody to fix those machines, because inevitably something will happen.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be peopless farms, but I do think there'll be a shift of people on farms. And I guess, the whole automation, robotics and technology piece is about doing things with more precision. It's about sourcing machinery to do a job where you don't actually have labour. So it might be that you think you're losing a job, or you didn't actually have a person to fill that job. That's why there's something to replace it. But I kind of look at the automation piece and the technology piece, which is about being more fulfilled in what you're doing because you're better over what you're doing. You're able to do it more precisely. You've got more certainty. It takes out some of that risk. So that's perhaps the holy grail. That's the vision. But that's, I think, what we're trying to drive towards.
Another question over here.
A bit of a statement, but then also a question, I guess. Back to the soil carbon opportunity around that. GRDC has invested a lot, I guess, in organic and carbon sort of through its cover cropping, but soil amelioration, where we're deplacing of organic matter, and we've done a lot of work in the past with DAF Queensland around soil organic matter and the value to our system. I guess it's actually the disconnect of how do we get more of that organic matter back into our soils to increase our productivity will help us both on the productivity side, the fertilizer side, and other ones. So I guess what is our strategy, or what's the opportunity around how we can repartition commodities back into the areas that we're taking it from a logistical or transporting. We transport so much of our nutrient away. How can we transport that nutrient and that value back into our farming soils and actually create value for that? I guess is a challenge that I'd put to the team up front.
Yeah, there is, Richard, a lot of energy going into thinking that problem through at the moment, because as you would know, there's various groups, including CRCs for food waste, and a whole lot of other people are are trying to work out how the circular economy process will actually work. So the trick is usually your waste source is not where the application site is. So you've got to be able to transform that waste source into a shape and size and weight and concentration to get it back, to backload it out at a competitive price. And so that's the things that we're working on at the moment is looking at transforming waste streams. Where are they? What's their quality? What's their regularity? What's the scale of those things? Because you need it to operate at a reasonable scale to make it efficient. We have no shortage of waste streams, but what their nutritive value is questionable at times. So we haven't got the answers yet, but there's a lot of work going into doing that.
Wonderful.
David Lawrence from DAF. I think we've done a lot of that soil organic matter work over the last decade, and I was talking to Wayne about it earlier. You read the media at the moment, you'd think it's a miracle. You can do something on your farm, double your carbon. I think this industry needs to put some effort and put some realism in that so that a lot of people don't get hurt by false expectations and shonky dealers, because everyone wants to be seen to be doing it at the moment. And, you know, Initec can close down a fertilizer plant and meet its carbon commitments a lot more easily that way, but it doesn't solve the problem of nutrient for Queensland. So I think there's a real challenge to just all pretend it's fantastic and we can double carbon and save the world. There's a lot of pushback on ESG on companies which are falsifying their claims. We've got to be really careful.
Oh, I might actually just quickly comment on that. I spoke to a farmer in Dundawindi last week, and he's putting his cotton back onto his farm. And a key question I said, are you just trying to save face here? Because the results, I called up the lab, the results, as they said in their words, were uninspiring, which is not something I'd love for a story, but hey, got to go with it. And I went back to the farmer, I said, so results aren't great, mate. So why are you doing it? What about the money? And his thing, which is so unique in agriculture, and he said he is driven by money, but at the end of the day, he's seen in Asia people living in his cotton garments in huge waste things. And he thought, look, if I can divert that back onto my farm and it doesn't do something negative to my soil, then why not? And I just thought, cool. But again, not the most profitable thing, how you're going to get everyone else on board. And, you know, you might not be saving face, but everyone's exactly right. It's that matter of looking to that circular economy. It is a bit of a buzzword, but that, seeing how we can do that and do it in a profitable way, I suppose. Another question?
Hello. I just wanted to say that I think soils is still that black box that we don't know enough about yet, and that's a real future focus that I think we need to look at. We need our soils, we need the land, and we need the nutrients, but we also need the soil biology that helps to transform that, and that is still got so much that we need to learn about it. So, and I think it's one area that we can potentially push forward and try to see some of these problems for soil carbon solved.
Anyone else like to comment?
Nikki, it's always been a difficult area around soil biology, probably a lack of investment because there's still a lot of unknown there. But what would that investment, where's the end point of that investment? Again, speaking for GLDC, we're very keen to have a discussion there, but what the outcome might be from doing more soil, looking at soil biology. Maybe carbon is the focus that allows us to invest more in understanding those soil biota and what their function is, and how do you leverage that into different systems. It's been a long, as you know, it's been a long debate about if we invest in better understanding our soil biota and its function, you know, what's that going to lead to in terms of system performance. It's still largely a black box. And as genome sequencing gets cheaper and cheaper and more available, then there can be breakthroughs.
Got time for maybe one or two more questions to start at the back here.
Yeah, thanks. Mark Hickman, DAF. I guess we heard this morning around consumers becoming more empowered. We've heard about provenance. We've heard about environmental credentials. And if we look over the east of the Great Divide and we see what's happening in the sugar industry and the reef and all that kind of stuff, surely if we look across west and we see the Murray-Darling Basin and we see a world in the future where we're measuring more and understanding more and probably becoming a little bit more transparent, what's the panel's thoughts about that sort of environment going forward and how we're positioned in agriculture to justify, I suppose, our agriculture in some of these landscapes which haven't been under the spotlight like the Eastern Board?
Mark, thank you so much for that. I needed a ball coming down just outside the off stump, that one. Well done. I suppose for my role here, I've got the Pulse Australia shirt on, I've got the Weed Smart or ARI shirt on. You know, I'm looking at pesticide resistance, I'm looking at MRLs, and I have a lot to do with the people who export our pulse crops. And of course, that is one of my big, trumpet calls about watching our MRLs, and MRLs have got to be 0.00 and all that sort of stuff. So it certainly hasn't escaped my attention, and I think I might get a bit of a name for some of those things about what I squawk on about quite a bit. So from my mind, I'm going to look after MRLs and doing everything right, looking at other options, like we're looking at mechanical desiccation of mung beans. Now, who would ever thought of that 10 or 20 years ago? But, you know, that's where we're up to at this present stage. So from my point of view, I'm going to look after those grain exports that we send overseas and make sure our MRLs or our pesticide residue levels are extremely low, if not 0.0 by some means or others.
Time for one more question. Oh,
can I just add to that? I think, Mark, some parts of the broadacre are better positioned than others. So I think if you think about the cotton industry, they've been through a lot of these social licence questions a lot earlier than the grains industry has, and certainly the sugar industry is right in the middle of it. So I think overall you'd say that we're probably not really prepared to. We have, as an industry, approached it in a defensive position in the past, and I think it will take some thinking through how we want to communicate what we do, how we do it, and why we are and how we are protecting, you know, the soil, which is the most precious resource that we have. And I'm not sure that we've sort of got all of our data and all of our case studies lined up. Because broadacre just hasn't felt the pressure that other industries have. The livestock industries are certainly right in the middle of that now. So, yeah, if that answers the question.
Mark, I can see that just being inevitable. I mean, the market will dictate the need for that information, and you know, I guess we should be prepared for that at some point that we'll need it. And you know, I spoke to the dairy industry a few years ago around automation, around some of the irrigation work, and the thing that they were interested in from an automation perspective was collecting data for their reporting. So what they wanted was automated reports on their natural capital and how well they'd managed the land in which they produce what they produce. So, and you know, I've had you know, meetings recently with PepsiCo, and one of the things that are driving them is those sort of environmental criteria. So that's heavily driving their business to the point where the people on the ground are not sure how they're actually going to you know, manage the targets that are coming down from above. So that's what I'm hearing, at least.
One more question.
Oh, can I finish that one off? Sorry.
God.
I'm on the panel.
I'm trying to stick to my time.
I do talks for various groups around the ridges. I do a lot of talking. No need to say anything. I do a lot of talking. One of the talks I did was the Port of Brisbane. So I've come to be pretty good person to them to go to with different things. So I did a talk to the Board of the Brisbane staff, and I was talking about water usage. You know, they worry about they export our goods, so we've got to look after them. So gave them a bit of an idea of how many megalitres a hectare cotton costs and corn costs and lucerne costs. And then I went back to their turf in their yards, and that brought it home to them that, hey, we're not doing too bad out here, but their bloody grass lawns in Brisbane has taken an awful lot of water. And that really hammered home from that. They didn't realise. So I still think it's part of all of us that when you get a chance, you do talk about agriculture very favourably and give some data out.
One last question.
Wasn't a question, it was a statement. Water in the north. Can I just make a few comments about developing the north from our perspective, what we've seen up there? There's some fundamental issues around available infrastructure, transport, the actual water infrastructure is an ongoing issue, which is something the federal government and state government, I guess, will be involved in longer term. But the people capital is a huge issue. And I'll just make the point that one of the challenges we have in the north is you think there are not many agronomists down here and they're getting older that don't exist in the north. And that is a significant issue for us. Now, it's being addressed to some extent with southern growers purchasing land and actually going up there and then discovering things are a little bit different, but they're having a go. Many of the graziers are not really in a position to make the investment themselves, and they haven't got the skill sets either. So there are a number of challenges there that I think need to be addressed. I think they're in many ways bigger challenges than agronomic challenges at this point in time. There are a lot of other issues that need to be addressed in the first instance. It will happen. It is happening, but long way to go, and I'll be long gone before it's finalised, that's for sure.
Lovely sentiment to end on then. I'll hand it over to Gavin Ash then.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Look, thanks very much, everyone. It's been a very stimulating afternoon. Dare I say it was better than I thought, but okay, no, I won't say that. No, actually, I was really surprised. I thought everything went really well. And one of the main reasons that it ran very well was by the way that Lucy approached this. And I'd like everyone to join me in thanking Lucy for watching.
Thank you.
I think agriculture in Australia is better off for people like Lucy, who are young people, dare I say young women, coming across into agriculture from sciences. And one of the things that I often said to people was, if you really love science, if you really think science is fantastic and where you want to be, and there are a lot of kids that really like science, and you want a job, come to agriculture. So I think there's an opportunity there. Craig, don't say you never get anything from USQ. I'd like to thank Craig very much for his insights. He always brings an insight from the perspective of where the technology is going to go, but also engaging industry. And I think those are really important issues. I think that we are moving into a really great opportunity around technology and automation. But with that comes challenges. And the challenges, once again, has been pointed out by others, is around, are we replacing people with machines, or are we giving people better jobs in agriculture? And I think those are the sorts of things that we need to look at. One of the other things is that with a lot more measurement comes a lot more data. And so we should be able to try and use that data better, but we don't always use the data better because quite often some things don't talk to another. I remember telling my undergraduate students that we can measure things with a micrometer, then we mark it with a chalk line, and then we cut it with an axe. And that's basically where we are at the moment. Thanks very much, Jan, for being part of this. I thought it was very interesting. You brought that very people-centric, gender-centric and business-centric approach to agriculture. And I think all of those are the sorts of things that as scientists, quite often we forget, that they're about, we can do the really good science, but we need to have it adopted and we need to be able to get it out there. So I think those are really important aspects of it. Thanks very much for that. Now Peter's looking nervous. Paul, I thought it was really interesting talking about having students come through and have the young female students come through. At Charles Sturt University 12 years ago, we noticed that half of our students were female. But I think perhaps it's not about getting the students through the undergraduates, it's about retaining them after they get out. And I just wonder about whether we have to think about how we are more inclusive in that environment to keep those people on board with us and to keep those students going through. But thanks very much. And Peter Carberry, thanks very much for your input. It was great to have you here. It's good to get you back from Tasmania. I thought they might have kept you down there, but no, that's good. Look, and I think that, yes, there are opportunities, and everybody within the whole group have said there are challenges and there are opportunities across agriculture, and we all know those things. Yes, money is very important, but also is security for some of our staff. So one of the issues that we have as a university is actually having short-term contracts all the time. And I'm not saying this is just about GRDC or anything else, Peter. It's about how we do science in Australia. And we have to think about that. The universities are some of the biggest employers of scientists. A lot of the scientists go through and they get a postdoc or they get something else and they move into agriculture or whatever. One of the really big issues that we have, however, is that the federal government is not supporting universities. If you go back and you have a look, there has been money for tourism. There has been money for people working in bars as baristas, etc. And all those things are really important, but there's been nothing for higher education in any of that. So I really am concerned in the long term about where we're going to actually continue to fill that skills gap through in terms of our scientists going forward. But I'd like to finish there. I'll jump down off the soapbox now. I'd like to thank everybody for a really interesting conversation. I think they all did very well. I'd like you to join me. I'd also like to thank all the speakers from this morning and this afternoon. I think they all did a very, very good, very, very professional job. And then there's all the people behind the scenes, especially Kirsten. Where are you, Kirsten? There, Kirsten's behind the scenes. So Kirsten did a lot of the management of the overall thing. She was ably supported by Liz, by Juanita, by Will, and thanks very much, Simon, for running all the AV. That's been very good. I'd like to ask you all to hang around. We have a mingle. I've got no idea what's in a mingle, but we've got one out at the back, so if you'd like to come and join with us. And I'd like to thank you all once again for your being present. Thanks very much. You got really worried, I was
You need to put him on the edge of it. Really? This is wonderful.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you very much. Yeah. How long have you been here? 18 months? All right.